I am so pissed at myself right now. I just recorded the entire video, pretty much up until the last section of it, and my mic was not plugged in properly. And so I have to redo the entire recording because there was no audio recorded at all. I'm so fucking mad at myself. I noticed myself gravitating towards consuming content to distract myself. I noticed this especially when I got anxious because I didn't have access to the things that were distracting. These are things like YouTube and TV and music. I felt like I was getting too consumed in content, that it was taking away from my time, and I could be spending that time working on fixing my problems, or at least like addressing them in a more useful way. For me, I think a part of my healing from anxiety and depression and other mental and physical health conditions is gonna come from me sitting with myself and sitting with myself during uncomfortable moments, especially. But it's so easy to reach for technology to soothe my discomfort. It's so easy that I forget that I have to even expose myself to discomfort. And it might sound overly obvious that we need to expose ourselves to discomfort to get better at dealing with it. But when technology is so ingrained in our lifestyles now, it can be hard to pull ourselves out, even when we logically know that's what we need to do. Constantly reaching for something to fill the air is soothing temporarily, but I can't help but notice that the discomfort always returns. And if the discomfort always returns, I'm failing to address what needs to be addressed. But I also notice myself making excuses for my technology use. It is easier to pick up my phone than it is to sit and meditate for the same amount of time. And I know that it will be more beneficial for my brain to honestly work through my issues and the things going on in my head. And it will be more beneficial to meditate than to scroll on my phone. But technology does work, and it works well in the way that it works. It soothes, it distracts, it takes away the pain. And that's often just enough for me. I make up my mind, I allow myself to use the technology because it does feel good, it feels relieving. And I will say it's perfectly reasonable and okay in my head to use technology to distract yourself, to fill the air, to take away from something that's going on in your life. But you can't do that all the time whenever you feel discomfort, and that's what I was doing. The frequency I was using technology to cope was not okay. So I challenged myself. I took away technology as much as I reasonably could. And I'll admit that it's hard to maintain that, which is why I didn't try to do it for any extended period of time. I was mostly sticking towards 24 hours to start with. Our society really relies on technology for almost everything now, and so it is really hard to avoid. But on this day, I didn't scroll on social media. I didn't watch YouTube. I didn't listen to music. Actually, I might have listened to the music in like the radio, like in the car, but that's about it. I didn't spend hours getting buried on my laptop, and I didn't look at the news. And the goal was to spend as much time with myself as possible. I was really afraid that I wouldn't be able to tolerate it. I was almost certain I couldn't tolerate being with myself, sitting in myself, and just experiencing my emotions, my feelings, and my thoughts. Historically, it's driven me mad. I mean, a lot of my thoughts feel too anxious, too stressful, too fearful, especially when I'm just sitting around not doing anything. And so it's scary, the idea of having to sit with those and having nowhere to turn to for your typical distractions. Removing all of the coping skills that I rely on to get through my day is scary, but I did it, and it actually turned out better than I thought it could. I do want to share. I printed guidelines for myself before I went into this challenge. I pretty much wanted to get down on this paper why I was doing it, what I was doing, and reasonable ways to work around challenging moments. So pretty much, I went through. I was like, I'm trying to take away these coping mechanisms. I'm trying to replace them with this. Um, and this is what I hope to gain from this experience. So I was pretty much taking away social media use, general use of my technology. I was trying to stay offline as much as possible, avoiding the news. And also on my list at the bottom, I was trying to minimize how much I was isolating and how much I was dissociating. And those two things are kind of unrelated to the rest of this video, but I wanted to put those on there too because part of my goal was to stay grounded. Part of my goal was to be more involved in my own life. And so while the main fixation was removing these distracting coping mechanisms, there are also some other unhelpful coping mechanisms like dissociating, which I do automatically. It's not something I can really like prevent, but I can try to get myself out of. And isolating, which is something I can prevent, and that isn't necessarily as automatic as dissociating. So I was really just trying to take this day to be present and to be with myself and to surround myself with positive things. I set myself some guidelines for how I'm going to do that, and I also gave myself a list of ideas for what to do while I couldn't use technology. Because when I started, I was like, well, what am I going to do with my time now? And how am I going to cope essentially? And so this last part on the sheet I printed for myself, setting intentions and all that, I went through and I listed out things I could do with my time, things I could do instead of reaching for social media. And I'll go through those really quick for you right now. Number one, sit with your emotions. Let yourself be bored, sad, angry, disgusted, ashamed, happy, enthusiastic, apathetic, whatever it is. Let yourself feel them. Number two, catch up on rest. Number three, fill out worksheets addressing your mental and physical health. And these were things I had already pre planned for myself and printed. Number four, use alternative coping skills when needed. So this might be reading a book, but not getting too wrapped up in it, like not spending like 4 hours reading. I could exercise while trying to tune into my body. I could do yoga or stretches, and I could meditate. And number five, to avoid the hardest coping mechanism of them all, dissociation for me, try to implement grounding activities into your day. And for me, that turned out to be just writing in my journal about things that I was observing going on around me, what I could like see and hear and smell and all that. And that's a pretty basic grounding activity, but I did find it pretty helpful. So during this day, I was simultaneously taking away these distracting coping mechanisms, which I felt were unhelpful. And I was also replacing them with more mindful activities like journaling, meditation, and worksheets. And as I said a minute ago, it went a lot better than I was expecting it to. So let's talk about what happened. One of the first things I noticed was feeling slower. And I was a little confused by this because I didn't think I was consuming content that was really fast paced or even like heavy in subject matter. I feel like the heaviest thing I was consuming was like news media and things like that. Otherwise, I tried to stick to like more low key things. But for whatever reason, removing all of the content did feel like it slowed me down. I felt way less pressure, even though I shouldn't have really been getting pressure from the type of content I was consuming. And so it felt good. I felt peaceful, calm, content, and I was able to relish in that feeling because I was just going through my day feeling my feelings. As much as I used content to distract from bad feelings, sometimes it distracts from good feelings too. And so one of the things I found beneficial from this day was being able to recognize moments that I felt good, or maybe not even good, but I felt content, I felt at peace, I felt fine. And I did have moments where I didn't feel fine. I felt irritable or angry, or I felt really stressed and anxious, and I was having bad thoughts. But when those times came, I realized it's actually not that difficult to deal with them. And they do pass. Those feelings, they pass just as much as good feelings pass. And it became less scary to sit with myself throughout the day. When I first woke up in the morning, I was like, this is going to be the most dreadful day imaginable. And I'm going to constantly have to like slap my own wrist when I try to reach for my phone. But it did get easier, and it got easier really quickly. I was able to sit in my emotions. I was able to deal with that. I was able to sit in my emotions, and they didn't just pile on and get more and more overwhelming because I was ruminating. I let myself sit with those emotions and I let them pass. And something that I think helped with that is I did meditate on this day. I meditated twice. The first session was 40 minutes long, and the second one, which was closer to bedtime for me, was around 30 minutes long. And I've never been a big meditator. I've always struggled with it. But for whatever reason, I was able to sit there and actually enjoy the meditation this time. In the past, I felt too restless, like sitting there trying to meditate is agony because I'm restless. I need to be doing things. Uh, and I was restless. I did get restless sometimes during the meditation, but I allowed myself to be restless and then just come back to the meditating, come back to my breath. I don't know if it's just me getting older, me getting more experienced or whatever, but the meditation did go surprisingly well. Usually I suck at meditating. It lasts like 10 minutes and then I'm itching to get back up. But it went on and it felt pretty good. I don't think I noticed much of an effect after meditation, but I did notice myself relaxing and becoming okay with myself during the meditation. And I think with more practice, I'll see more benefit from it. The day overall felt really encouraging. I felt capable, I felt powerful, I felt strong, I felt able. Sure, it was hard at some points to not reach for technology, but I managed to do it. Um, and even though I didn't put any pressure on myself to do it for longer than like 24 hours, when I did go back to using technology, I immediately felt less pull towards it. My relationship to technology did change ever so slightly. And I don't think one day of being technology free has cured me of anything, but it proved to myself that I can do it. It proved that I don't need to reach for technology every time I feel uncomfortable, every time I feel like I need to get out of my body. Because what I realize is I don't need to be outside of my body, separate from my body. I don't need to get away from my thoughts and my brain. I'm much easier to deal with than I thought I was. And I said I did go back to using technology. I have since incorporated YouTube videos back into my day. I listened to music a lot, like the day following the No Technology Day. I spent most of my time actually just listening to music. But now it feels a little bit more balanced. Like, I can consume content, but I also know in the back of my mind now, I don't need to. And if there's ever a moment where I'm feeling uncomfortable, maybe it's best I just shut off the video, I turn off the music, and I sit with myself. Because I proved to myself already I can. I feel uncomfortable a lot, physically, mentally, whatever it is. But it's also not impossible to put up with myself. I can do it without needing to be distracted, and sometimes the distraction is counterproductive. It's not helpful to be distracted. Sometimes it is. Sometimes distraction is an incredibly valuable tool, but not all the time, and not in the way that I was using it. So if you're like me and you've got this coping mechanism that feels like it's holding you back in some way, I suggest you just take one day without it. See if you can do it, and see if you can prove to yourself that you definitely can do it. I was really hesitant going into this first day without using technology as my coping mechanism. But now that I've proved it to myself that I can, it'll be easier to do it next time. I think that's the goal for any treatment. It gets easier, it gets better. If you can go one day without your unhealthy coping mechanism, you can go 2 days, 3 days eventually. And it doesn't need to be a rush. You don't need to hurry yourself into it or be so judgmental about how you do it. Just set some guidelines for yourself. Set some parameters. Give yourself ideas for what to do instead. Work with yourself, not against yourself. And like I've said throughout this entire video, like, it's okay to sometimes need a distraction to use a distraction. And I'm not the kind of person who's going to swear off YouTube or social media. I just want to use it in more moderation. I want to use it and engage with it in a healthier way. And if you want to do the same, here's some proof that you can do it, that you can work through those difficult moments, and it does get better. And I really do hope you could take something from this video, especially because this is my second time recording all the way to this point. Um, I'm still super mad at myself for that. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to share my experience here. I found it pretty profound, even if it seems pretty obvious. And so, hey, maybe it was worth sharing. But please let me know if you did find any of this video to be particularly informative or helpful in some sort of way. I'm always curious to see what other people's thoughts are. And if you did like the video, I would really appreciate if you gave it a like and subscribe to my channel. It would help me a ton. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me today, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.